Okay, and we're live once again. Sorry for all the technical issues. I believe most of the viewers won't be back now. Yeah, I've published that this stream will be delayed. But in any case, I've decided to do it, give it one last attempt. So if there's anyone here in the chat right now, feel free to participate. And the rest will watch the stream when it's gonna be uploaded later. If you're watching it on a replay, like not live, feel free to send me any questions you have, and I will answer it in the next stream that will please go smoothly, or I'll just upload the video with the answers and the next video theme. Once again, I'm highly sorry for all those troubles. As mentioned, this is my first stream. Let's quickly check that we're all good. I want to make sure before I continue on, so I won't have all those issues again. Un momento. And yeah, so far so good, to be honest. Just write in the chat if you can hear me and everything is fine. And I'll dive right in. Un momento. Okay. So, let me introduce myself for the first time this evening. I'm Dean. I'm a sound designer for video games. I also do sometimes post-production, all those stuff, but mainly I do game audio. I also compose for games, but mostly a sound designer. And for the last 3 years, 3 or 4 years, I've been traveling around, nomading, if you like, even though I hate that term. But yeah, just recording whatever I find interesting in my way. And making audio for video games. Yeah, just like literally traveling around and making audio, which are like two of my greatest passion. And I'm glad I can get to do it all together. Again, let me just check that we're all fine. Yeah, we're still good. Let's hope it all goes smoothly. In any case, as mentioned, it's my first stream, and I've been dealing a lot with the question if I want to make a video about game audio and Unity and how to present it, and I've decided finally to just do a live stream that will hopefully go better than it went for the last hour, that will allow me to just interact as is with viewers and with your questions, and just introduce the basic audio engine that Unity has that so many people are not aware of. Now, every once in a while, a sound designer will approach me and they will ask me, hey, Dean, how do I get into game audio? I've been working in post, I'm a musician. And I get mostly a lot of the same questions. Most of them are great questions that are very, again, obvious for people who want to put their foot at the door. Like, how much do you charge? Where do you start? Where do you start? How do I build myself up? Where do I find my first client? How should I build my portfolio? And all those questions. But something that keeps coming up again and again and again is which middleware I should start with. And I think that's a big mistake. Now, don't get me wrong here. I do think learning and being a master of some kind of a middleware or of both middlewares, at least that I'm familiar with. There's another third one, which I'm never heard about. Never mind. If it's Fmod or Wise, it's important. But I do think learning the game engine or Unity or Unreal or Godot for that matter will be way more crucial. In other words, it's a mistake to start with a middleware, and that's for several reasons. First of all, doing the transition from a game engine to a middleware is way easier than doing the vice versa, doing a transition from a middleware into the game engine. And the reason is that those middlewares are based upon those game engines, like the lingo and all of those different terms are just terms they got from those game engines. Now, I actually started learning Wise before I learned Unity, and a lot of the stuff there was just complete gibberish for me, or I just have to accept them without really understanding what's going on. And only later, when I studied Unity, I started to understand more and more what those terms mean, how do I use this lingo, and how it all works out. And more importantly, Once you know a game engine, you can understand how you want to build your audio system in your middleware. Without understanding how Unity or Unreal, for that matter, actually works, it will be very difficult to build a proper system in your middleware because you're not really familiar with the nits and grits of a game engine or coding, for that matter. So really understanding at least the basics of a game engine or like C#, for example, would allow you to make a better system in your middleware. Second reason, I think it's really crucial to start with a game engine. And a lot of your clients, whether just like studios, like small or big companies who are making those casual games, won't necessarily want to work with a middleware. And sometimes it will be for good reasons, sometimes it will be for terrible reasons. But again, some of the reasons are good. And this should not mean that us as sound designers should tell them, so I can't help you. I can only work if you have a middleware because this is the software for me as an audio designer. No, it's a mistake. A sound designer that's a sound designer for games should know how to work with the actual game engines where people actually build their games. And if a client tells you, hey man, I'm not gonna have a middleware for whatever reason, the last answer you want to give him is like, okay, so I'm just gonna send you my assets and good luck. You literally won't have control of how it's implemented and how to mix it. You can only advise the programmers later on, if you do a QA, and if they'll have the time, like what to change and how to change, and it will be really difficult to actually say it or actually communicate it. And you know, eventually we're sound designers for games. We should know, again, the game engine. And what sets us apart from other sound designers, not demeaning out like other sound designers, is that we actually use the software that are relevant for gaming, for where they develop games. So we must know and be familiar with those softwares and with coding. And I know it's a pain in the ass for a lot of people out there just hearing the word, I need to learn coding. But yeah, learning basic coding. Nobody's supposed to be a programmer. Nobody's supposed to know a lot about C# or whatever. Just know the basic scripting language of your game engine, whether it's C# for Unity or C++ for Unreal or whatever they're using in Godot. I'm not really sure. So yeah, for those reasons, I believe it's... Oh, actually, sorry, there's another important reason. Communication. It will be way easier for us sound designers to communicate to the programmers what we need and what we want if we're actually familiar with the software. For example, if I'm not familiar with the game engine, like Unity, for example, I can try and tell the programmer, hey man, these 4 sound assets are the footsteps. Please call them whenever the character, I don't know, having a footstep. And then the programmer can understand it however he likes. We didn't tell him how to call those footsteps. We didn't tell him where to call those footsteps from. And we for sure won't mix those footsteps. But if I'll tell him, hey man, please call those assets from a fixed array and randomize the calling, and please call them from an animation event that is relevant to the character that is currently running, he will know what to do, and he will probably do it in 2 minutes because it's not so hard. We're actually going to do it in those streams. So yeah, I really recommend knowing the software, develop a common language, and take charge of your whole audio system inside those game engines. As a disclaimer though, I am not a programmer, okay? I'm far from it. I will never be able to build a game inside Unity. But if I'll see a C# script, I will know how to read it. I will understand it. I will know where stuff are being called from, when are being called from, and all different parameters that go inside and how like the programmer decided to call whatever event. I would also know how to write basic code and basic audio code, sorry, wherever it's important, or just like write a random, like a new script for whatever function I need from my audio. So yeah, I would be able to do all of this. Again, I'm not a programmer, but as you'll see in those streams and the follow-up streams, that just knowing a bit of code can make a whole lot of change for your audio system. So before we get going, I'll just look at the chat for questions. Fradij, sorry for saying it wrongly. What do you think are the best startup ways to pick up coding? Udemy, Game Dev TV, for sure. Game Dev TV having free courses, I think. They have about Unity 2D, Unity 3D, and they also have about Unreal and all those stuff. And they're touching coding. It's like Unity course for our matter, but they're constantly touching coding and in a very simple and fair way. This is where I started learning code. And this was like my base for learning code, and everything else that I got stuck upon, I just YouTube stuff like, hey, how do I make this sound to do A, B, or C? And I just searched it up in YouTube or used my best pal, ChatGPT, that can help you a lot as well. So this is where I start getting familiar with coding. So yeah, without further ado, let's dive right in. So this is the Red Runner. It's a free game that you can download for Unity and just load it up and do whatever you want inside this game. I just downloaded this game and I took all the audio out and all the audio system. This game actually has a really neat audio system. I took it all out and I replaced it with my own system and my own sounds. So all the things you're hearing here, we will do it as we go along in those streams. And we'll try to touch on all the basic stuff that we need from a game. It's like 2D audio, like the ambience and the music. Sounds that are localized in 3Ds, like this saw you're seeing right here, that is chasing me, that is coming a bit from the left, picking up coins, and how do we call them, footsteps for the runners that calling from animation event, jumping, and landing. And probably now I'm gonna die, so let's just die. We're gonna set up a mixer that creates changes between snapshots based on the player's inputs. Right now, I'm inside the pause snapshot, and if I press this return button, you can look at my master and see what happens to all the parameters here, to the filter here, and to reverb. I will change parameters based on player's input. So we'll learn about those. We will learn how to call different sounds for when the player is dying, like if you remember, when we just died because of the saw, the player did a fart sound, but now he just screamed as he drowned in the water. So we learn how to build like a simple and neat system. It's just for whenever same event is occurring, how we're calling different sounds. So yeah, this is pretty much it. It will help us to go along all the different aspects or basic aspects we actually need from Unity. And again, it will be how to set up a mixer, how to change snapshots or getting like a general state of our sound based on player input, how to call sound from animation. We're gonna use code and all those beautiful shenanigans from here. So yeah, let's dive right in. So as I said, this is the clean version, by the way. As I said, I cleaned out all the audio that this game already has in it. And it will cause you a lot of trouble because you will see a lot of errors, because when you cut out snippets of code from code, then you create errors and the game won't work. And it can be quite annoying. So if you want this game, you can just send me a message on LinkedIn or Wiggles if you're from there, or Facebook or whatever. And like, hey, Dean, can you please send me over the game, like the clean version? And I will send you over this clean version with no audio, which is running and have no problem. Now, for those of you who are, sorry, I'm looking every once in a while in the chat to see what's going on. For those of you who are not familiar at all with what's happening, start with download Unity. So you can just go to the World Wide Web. Wait a minute, un momento. Yes, okay. Let me put it on screen. There we go. And you can just type in Unity Hub. And you will see Unity Hub, and you'll click on Unity Hub, and you'll click Get Started with Unity, and you'll download it for Windows or Mac or whatever you have. After you download it and you install it, you will have this hub installed. Now, you can just think about it like, you know, the native hub, like native instruments or waves or, you know, every other plugin software. This is not actually Unity. This is just like, you know, organizing all of your Unity assets, and assets, I'm saying all your Unity projects and all your Unity installs, and it will just help you to have them all organized. And then you can just like, you know, search your projects quite easily or your different versions of Unity. Now, before you can actually do something, you need to install some kind of version of Unity. So you just go to the Installs tab and you say Install Editor, and you choose whatever version you want. And as you press install, make sure you install the Visual Studio, not specifically the community. I already have the Visual Studio. This is where you're gonna write down your code or open up code. You need to have the Visual Studio in order to actually use Unity and build games. So make sure you also install Visual Studio. The other stuff are not really important. You don't need them. And if whenever you work on Unity and your team tell you, hey man, do you have an Android build support? Then install it then. You don't need it for now. As you can see, they're all quite heavy. So don't download them all. Just download what you need. Which version of Unity you should use? In general, it's a recommended practice to always have the same version as the game or a newer version, never the older version. So let's say this Red Runner was built on Unity 2019.3. Use 2019.3 or a newer version, never like an earlier version. As you can see, I'm using a Unity 2022.3, so you can make sure you download this software and the game will open up smoothly and there will be no problems. So after you installed that thing, your Unity editor, you can get going with your Red Runner, you can load it up, and yeah. So let's dive right into Unity's basic building blocks. Okay, let me just see if I have any questions in the chat up so far. Chat is clean. Cool. So in order to play a sound in Unity, you have 3 basic building blocks that without them, you won't be able to play or hear any sound. And everything else doesn't really matter. Those are the basic things that you have to have in your game in order to play your audio. First building block will be your audio clip, which is the actual audio file in your game, okay? It's just it's just the file you exported from your DAW or a file you dropped in from Soundly. This is just literally the audio file. Now, the audio clip does not live inside your game. It's not a part of your scene or your level. Notice all those terms I'm using, they're gonna be quite crucial as we go along. Just think about it as an audio file that lives inside your audio pool in your DAW. It's just inside your Unity project, it's not inside your game. But if you click on the audio clip, as you would see, this is where you will choose and change all the different loading and compression type, and we'll touch a bit about it later in the stream. And we also talk about optimization in future streams in more extensively. The audio source, the second building block, does live in your scene, and it's the actual emitter of the audio clip. Okay, think about the audio source as a speaker that lives inside your scene that plays whatever audio clip you tell them to play. Now, the audio source will also allow you to control different parameters like when to play and the volume and the pitch and priority, and we'll go all over those stuff, don't worry about it, and the 3D settings that will allow you to determine how far or close you should hear the sound based on your audio listener position, which we'll touch in a jiffy. But the audio source in general does live inside your scene. It's the actual speaker or emitter that plays your audio clip that you will associate with it. And the third building block will be the audio listener. Those are literally our ears inside our game. Okay, this is where Unity will listen to the different audio sources that is scattered around the map. And this is where he will do all the processing for the audio. Like if there's an audio source behind the wall, there's all occlusion type. And if some audio sources or if the audio listener is inside a reverb zone, so we should process the reverb, and all those nitty-gritty audio stuff will happen in the audio listener. Now, you have to have at least one audio listener in your scene. To be honest, I have never had 2 audio listeners. I'm not even sure that's possible. But if you're not going to have audio listener in your scene, you de facto did not tell Unity where to listen to the audio from. So you will not be able to actually determine how the audio sources should play. Okay, the audio sources and the audio listener plays in relation to one another. So you have to have both in your scene. So the audio clip, the actual sound file that lives inside your project. This is where we're gonna mess around with the loading and compression type of each audio file. The audio source, the actual emitter of our audio clips inside our scene, and the audio listener are de facto ears inside our scene that will listen to the different audio sources and will process the sound accordingly. The audio mixer will be touched a bit later this stream, so don't worry about it. Okay, so let's just start right in and drag in our first audio clip and our first audio sound. But right before that, let me quickly move the camera to the left side so you can see everything properly. Cool. Alrighty. So here on this tab, this is called the project tab. This tab actually holds all of the game's assets inside that lives inside the game, from the animations, scripts, audio, materials, prefabs, everything that lives inside the game as an asset will be under the project tab right here. You will see it by default as you'll install Unity. This is also where we're gonna store all of our audio files. So we're gonna right click on the asset tab, create folder, and we're gonna create a folder called audio. Audio. Now, do bear in mind, game projects tend to get messy quite quickly, okay? Make sure you're as organized as possible right from the get-go. So all the folders and all the files should be properly named and placed where they should be, okay? Later on, finding them could be quite a mess. I know there's search bars, but believe me, it's a headache. So make sure you're as organized as possible. Also, your team will thank you for that. So let's enter into the audio. Let's open a new folder called SFX. And because I'm gonna drag in an ambience effect that's gonna play in 2D, let's create a new folder that is called ambience. Now, let me drag and drop my ambience quite quickly. Let's write down our audio. I pre-made those sounds, and let's drag in this audio for the ambience, this audio clip for the ambience. Now, those are just quick sounds. I dragged most of them from Soundly or edited them properly so they can play in loop. This is not a sound design stream. This is a more of a how to implement our asset stream, obviously. So this is the audio clip. And as I said, it does not live inside our scene. As you can see, the scene tab, it's not inside it currently. And if I click on the amp birds file, on this audio clip file, you can see this under this inspector, all these parameters open up. And this is where I can control the loading and compression type. Now, we're not going to talk about loading and compression in this stream, but do think about games like this. In a way, games is just a series of loading and unloading files from a software. And the audio is going to play a huge part of it, okay? In almost every game, the audio is always loaded in and loaded out. It's just like, quick instances sounds, or they're going to be played for long, and we need to make everything adaptive. So audio will always play a crucial part from the hard and runtime memory. So as sound designers for games, we also have to understand how we want to load and unload our files and how we want to compress them. Now again, we're going to touch it on a different stream. What it will be important for you to know right now, that this is where you control it for each audio file. And also, you can have different parameters for different platforms. Let's say I'm making a game for PC and also for Android. I can have different loading and compression type based on the different platforms. And yeah, this is pretty much it. This is where we're gonna do it inside the audio clip. Also do note, like this file, for example, is 48 kilohertz, which is terrible for this kind of situation. Like it's way, this file is way too heavy. But do note that you can change, the sample rate here. This file was also originally a WAV file, and it was already automatically compressed into the OGG Vorbis. So yeah, do take in mind that you can drag in full quality audio assets, and you can compress and change them right here. So let's add this audio clip into our scene. And as we said, we need to have an audio source, our emitter. Now this is our scene. This is where all of our game objects, those are game objects, are gonna live. And this is just a representation of our game. Now this is a 2D game, so this is how we literally look at our game. Under the game tab, this is literally how the game would look from the camera. And over here, under this hierarchy tab, this is just where all of our game objects are gonna live. So we have the runner game object, and we have our camera game object. This is the camera, and canvases were just like the background or like the loading screen, and all of our managers for the game, which is just, the game manager and the UI manager. All of the objects, like all of the components that lives inside our game or our specific scene/level is gonna live inside this hierarchy. So we're gonna right click here and create an empty game object, and we're gonna call it amp source. Cool. And under each game object, right now it's just a game object, it just lives somewhere inside our map. It currently lives somewhere here. Let's first of all reset its transform, like where it's actually located on the screen. And it's going to send it to 0, 0, 0, 0. So now we have our game objects right here. It lives right here. And each game object can have different components. For example, this red runner have this script and other components. Canvases have other components as well as the main camera. But yeah, right now this amp source has no component on it. And we're going to add the audio source component into this game object. So let's add in. You're gonna see it like this. Let's add in the audio source. Cool. And now we have an audio source component on our game object that lives inside our scene. And by clicking on this little circle here, we can look for audio clip. And right now, this audio source is associated with this audio clip and it will play this audio clip. Or we can do it in a much cooler way. Instead of opening up an audio source and associate an audio clip with this, we can just drag and drop this audio clip into this game object and pop an audio source with the current audio clip or with the right audio clip. Cool. So right now we have an audio source that lives here and it plays this audio clip. Let's go over the other parameters this audio source have. The output, this is where I'm going to route each audio source to my mixer that we will later in the stream look at. Mute is just mute. And I'm going to skip all those and go straight to play on awake. Currently, play on awake is ticked. And in general, you should know that there's two crucial methods or functions that start as a player starts a game, as he presses play. First of all, there will be the awake function, and then it's gonna be the start function. Now, it doesn't matter what they actually mean at the moment, don't think about it too much. Just bear in mind that if an audio source play on awake function is ticked, then this audio source is gonna load whatever audio clip is associated the audio clip into memory as the scene awakes, and it's gonna play it automatically. So right now, if I'll press play, I will hear this audio clip. And let's see. Cool. Press play, and I'm hearing this beautiful ambience of birds tweeting around me. Cool. Just a quick tip. Games and projects can tend to get very heavy, so pressing play every time can be quite tedious and annoying. So instead of pressing play to check everything up, you can just toggle on and off this speaker here, and it will start whatever sound or whatever audio source is ticked to play on awake or should play when the camera is near it. So without just pressing play, without actually starting the game, I can just listen to my audio sources. Cool. The next important function, at least for files like this, will be the loop function. So currently, if I'll start the game, this current audio clip is, I think, 27 seconds, give or take. So after 27 seconds, this file will stop. But if I'll tick loop, this audio source play whatever audio clip it has inside of it and will play it in loop each time the audio clip will finish. So right now, it doesn't matter how long the player is gonna play, this audio source is gonna play the amp bird's audio clip in loop until I tell it otherwise. If I tell it from code to stop, or change the scene, or drop this audio source from memory, we have a lot of different ways to stop a looping file from playing, but this is how you tell it just to play on loop. Cool. Our next thing to look at, by the way, I ignored those effects and reverbs on for now because they're just gonna mess it all up. Usually I don't use them. I use reverb zones and effects from my mixer, even though I might go over it in later streams. Right now, don't worry about it. 80% of the time or 90% of the time, we're not gonna use it at all. At least I didn't use it almost. Mute, by the way, is just mute. I think it goes without saying. Cool. Priority. Now, if you remember earlier, wait, let's make it a bit quieter. If you remember, I said that as sound designers for games, we have to take charge about optimization. That means to take charge about our hard and runtime memory usage, okay? We have to understand what's happening there and how to optimize our audio assets and our audio systems. Now, games, and Unity is like any other game engine, sorry, has a real and a virtual voice count. That means that you know, you can play in games like, you know, 50 or 70 audio sources at once, and it can get quite heavy. Like, think about, I don't know, like a multiplayer first-person shooter game, and you have several players, and they all have their footsteps and their gears and their shooting and their music in the background, and there's the ambience and birds and planes flying over, and you have tons of monsters or, I don't know, whatever soldiers running around, and they all have their different footsteps and they all firing their weapon. It can quickly come up to like 50, 60, 70 audio sources playing at once, and this is hellish. First of all, just think about what you're doing to the actual memory usage, and second of all, think about mixing it. It's quite horrible. It's gonna take, I don't know, you really need to break your head to actually mix so many audio sources. That's not to say that's not happening, but it's gonna be horrible. So for that, we have our virtual and real voice count. So if you go to Edit and Project Settings, and under this Audio tab, you see this maximum real voice and maximum virtual voice. What it actually means that currently we can play up to 32 audio sources at once. If you play more than 32 audio sources, then Unity will start to drop it and consider it as a virtual voice. De facto, we will not be able to hear it. Like, Unity will load everything into memory, like the position of the audio source and the audio file, but you won't be actually able to hear it, and Unity won't actually play it. So by that, helping us to mix our game, and more importantly, actually to manage our memory usage. Now, if we pass 32 real voices, it's gonna consider it a virtual voice. Or if we just like used our last voice in the 32 and now we have only 31 voices, Unity is gonna draw the most relevant voice from the virtual voices, and it's gonna keep taking them into real voices. Now, you can change it. You don't have to put in 32. You could put 64 or whatever you like, but 32 is quite a decent place to start. Most of the games that I currently sound design for don't really need more than 32 sounds playing at once, but yeah, you can control it. Priority, in any case, help us to tell Unity which audio source is crucial. Now think about it like that. Let's take Doom 2016 or Doom Eternal, for example, because I love Doom. And I would say with like high confidence that the music is one of the most crucial things that happens in Doom, and I don't want it ever to stop. No matter what happens, I don't want the game engine to throw it out of memory. Now, if I have one of those super important audio files, like the music in our case, for example, I will tell Unity to put it on the highest priority. That means that no matter what happens, no matter how many audio sources count we have, you will never throw out the music, at least as long as you have lower priority audio sources. And if we're gonna have the lowest priority, like let's say it's a bird flap of just like an ambience bird that we don't really care about, like a wing flap, sorry, then yeah, Unity, throw it out of memory, we don't really care about it, it's fine, and play it as long as we have enough voice counts. So yeah, this is the priority. You probably won't use it in so many scenarios, but to take in account, it lives here. Volume. Now, volume quite speaks to itself, but do notice we have a really weird volume parameters here for us sound designers. It goes between 0, which is absolute silence, and 1, which will be the maximum volume. The maximum volume of what? The maximum volume of our audio clip. That means that you cannot go higher, or you cannot raise the volume of the actual volume of the audio asset you dragged in. Let's say you exported a file in a certain volume. You cannot make it louder from this audio source. 1 will represent the actual volume of your audio clips. But don't worry about it. We're not going to use this volume slider for 99% of our mix. This is where we're going to randomize the volume for each audio clip, but not where we're going to control our mix. So don't worry about it. We will be able to raise the volume for each audio clip if we need to do it. So yeah, so do bear in mind, this is annoying, like to think about it, but don't worry about it as well. Pitch, and this is where it gets cool, I have to say. This is like where games are just like so unique inside this audio field. So when pitch have the parameter of 1, the value of 1, it means it's gonna play the audio clip at the same pitch as it was exported and at the same speed. 2 would mean it will play it an octave higher and twice as fast. Same goes for 4 and 8 and so on. 0.5 will mean it play it an octave lower and twice as slow. And you can already see why audio is amazing. Listen to those, like, you know, birds I recorded where I live in Israel, up in the north, and now it just sounds like a jungle in Thailand. In any case, 0.25 will make it like 2 octaves lower and even slower, like, you know, double the speed down is slower, even half slower. Never mind, you get what I'm saying. And now the bird sounds like monkeys because audio is just cool. Just listen to it. Like monkeys or space birds. In any case, if I'm gonna put the value of 0, we won't be hearing anything at all. Okay, the file is actually not playing like it's no. We literally told the speed to be 0, if that makes sense. And this is where it gets funky. -1 will play our file at the same speed, at the same pitch, but in reverse. -2 will play it an octave higher, twice as fast, but in reverse. Same goes for -0.5. An octave lower, twice as slow, but in reverse. Now, this is not at all how we sound designers used to think about pitch. Like, DAWs does not work like that at all. And I have to say, this is really cool. I really love it. It allows you to do quite cool things with your audio inside your game. Okay, well, there's one game I'm really proud of who worked on Oakenfold, that the programmer literally used the pitch to control scrubbing between, like, you know, if the player like rewinds or doing forward really quickly. So you can just literally control the sound and take it between different pitches or playing in it rewind. Very cool parameter. I just love this pitch slider. Like, it was very unintuitive for me, and it's cool. Play around with it. In any case, stereo panning. Panning quite speaks to itself. And before we go into spatial blend, let's talk about the audio listener that we mentioned. Now, by default, when you open a new scene, or in a lot of games, not necessarily all of the games, but a lot of the games, the audio listener will be placed on the main camera. And as I did not finish my sentence, by default, Unity will place an audio listener on the main camera. Now, this is our camera game object, and the audio listener lives here. And if we won't have an audio listener in our scene, as I said, we won't be able to hear anything, because we're literally just not listening from nowhere to the audio sources that currently lives inside our scene. So we have to have an audio listener. Now, the audio listener position, which is currently here in the center of our game, will determine where we're capturing the audio sources from. So if we have an audio source that his special blend parameter is all the way 3D, we're gonna hear the audio sources in relation to the location of the audio listener. In that case, all the way here. And on each audio source, you have all those cool parameters and these values you can change and see where is your audio listener is located in relation to this audio source. So let's play the audio, and you will see the audio is really low, like it's coming from the left, but really, really quiet. And if we'll move the audio source, you can see the audio listener here change its position in relation to the location of the audio source. See, it's getting closer and closer and closer. And the reason we're hearing it so quietly is because by default, this is the distance unit and this is the roll-off for the volume. But if we change the volume roll-off for custom, you're gonna hear it quite loud immediately. And from the left, because it's localized on the left of our audio listener. And you can see it's getting closer and further away as we're turning from left to right. Now, when the special blend is fully on 3D, the audio clip, doesn't matter how you exported it, it's gonna play monophonically in relation to the audio listener. And if you're gonna blend it between the two, you're gonna soften up a bit this effect. But actually, this effect is imitating a different parameter called spread that we will talk a lot when we're gonna talk about localizing our audio sources. But it's actually like beginning the spectrum of the audio clip or the audio source that is playing. So it won't be completely monophonic, but you will hear it in some spectrum, and it will give it a more realistic aspect to it. So right now we're hearing it here, and as we get further away, we don't just have one monophonic source, we're having some kind of a spectrum we're listening to the sound from. As you can see, as we're changing from right to left. gives it a way more realistic approach. Now, some sounds you want to be super monophonic and localized somewhere. Some you want to open up a bit, some you open up some more. Now, if we're gonna take the spread all the way to 360, it's just gonna switch around the sounds placement panning-wise. So right now, we're on the right of the audio listener, but if we go, and we're hearing the sound from the left. But if we take our audio source all the way to the left, we're gonna hear it from the right. So do pay attention to this. But currently, we just need it as a 2D, but just so you would know, this is where the 3D sound settings are are placed inside the audio source. So let's stop this audio source and reset the transform. All right. So this is the audio source, this was the audio listener, and we talked about the audio clip, the three main building blocks, and questions up so far before I go into the audio mixer. Okay, cool. I know a lot of you tried to watch this stream like an hour ago, and I had all those technical issues, so I just lost a lot of you. But if you're watching it on replay, feel free to send me any questions up so far, and I will gladly answer it immediately or in the next stream. Now let's talk about the audio mixer. So the audio mixer tab will live here where the project tab lives. Now, if you don't see this tab, like let's say this is how your Unity loads up, you can just press Ctrl 8 or Command 8 if you're having a Mac. Or you can do it in the old way and go to the window, audio mixer, and you will open up your audio mixer tab. Now, in general, most of the programmers or game developers, whatnot, did not know about the audio mixer. And if they did know about the audio mixer, they just routed some audio sources into the mixer, but didn't really know how to use it. And it makes sense because the audio mixer is our field. This is where us sound designers shine. This is where we're supposed to take charge of the game's audio inside our game. This is where we thrive, if you like. So please use the audio mixer and please use it from the start. As you see, we're just placing audio sources on game objects, but in bigger and bigger games, it will be quite tedious to find each audio source and route it into an audio mixer. And let's say, sorry, all of a sudden, you want to change some parameter of a specific audio source. It's going to be a nightmare to search it all up in your hierarchy, on your different scenes, or inside your project prefabs. It's going to be horrible. So make sure you open up a mixer, set it up nice and tidy right from the get-go, and use it properly, and route all of your audio sources into your audio mixer in whatever way you want and fits your project. So to create a new mixer, just press the plus sign here. And wait, sorry, let me move the camera to the other side before I get go so you can probably see it. Poof. Cool. And let me open up the stream to see if we have any questions. And right now I just opened a new audio mixer. Let's rename it. Call it main mixer. You can make how many mixers you want in your game. You can route mixers into mixers. You can create a whole hierarchy of mixers. This will help you to control your audio system way better and way more neatly. It's amazing. I used it in several projects. But again, we're going to stick to one mixer for now just to get the hand of it. So the first thing we want to talk about in our mixer are mixer groups. Now in Unity, everything you know as faders, tracks, channel, auxiliary buses, sends, returns, all of those are just groups. And those groups can function as each of those things I mentioned. They can be just a track, they can be an auxiliary, they can be a receive track, they can be whatever you like. But it's important to know that the lingo for this, what you would call in the DAW channel track or whatever, is group. And it's really crucial that from now on, we're gonna call them groups. Or if you're talking to your programmer, you're gonna call it a group. And the reason for this, because they don't know how do you actually call those faders. They will call them faders or the volume knobs or the sliders or whatnot. But it's important we all call it group because also when we want to like change parameters from code, we're gonna locate those functions when we look up for groups, okay? From now on, faders /channels /tracks / whatever are called groups. So Everything is gonna be routed into the master group that is automatically created. So let's say I'm creating a new group and I'm calling it an ambience. And for me, it's gonna be the master ambience group. And under ambience, I'm gonna create a bird group that is gonna be routed into the ambience, which is routed into the master. Now I can also just drag, I don't know, the group outside of the ambience group. But right now, they won't be routed into each other, but they'll all be routed into the master group. So let's write it back into the ambience. And before we actually associate it, let's go about the other parameters we have inside our mixers. And let's talk about views. And for that, let's open up the remade version. So as you see, we can have quite a lot of groups and routing of the groups into different groups, which can get a bit messy. So the views will help us to create different ways we can look on our mixer. So the all view will literally be all of my groups that I have inside my game. The master view will just show me the master groups, and the runner view was just an example, so just viewing the groups that belongs to the red runner, like his footsteps, his death screams, and whatnot. And it will help me to just work and view whatever I need. So it's also important that you will set up your views properly and don't make it over messy. It's also important. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the snapshots. Now, snapshots are actually just mixer states. Okay, it's not each snapshot I can have a different mix. It means I can have different volume, different inserts parameters, different send parameters, but they're just like mixer states that will change according to the player behavior. Now, the snapshot with the star will be the start snapshot. That will be the snapshot that will be loaded as we press play. Now, on this specific game, because we're starting the game and automatically having the loading screen, or the pause screen, this pause snapshot will be called automatically. But the main snapshot is actually the main snapshot. Don't overthink about it. Just take from here that the snapshot with the star is your default snapshot. So as I press play, it's gonna load up the pause snapshot. Let's have the master view so we can see how it changes things. And as I press play here to start the game, it will transition into the main snapshot. And just look at the effects here. Cool. And if I'll press escape, like I paused the game, I will change the parameters again. And also you can notice how the ambience will raise slowly as I'll start the game all over again. And what I hope it makes clear is that I can control the crossfade between the different parameters when I change between different snapshots. And you can already see how by just using this mixer states or snapshots, I can create a more of an adaptive and elaborate audio system that it's just fits my player's way of playing. And I can already make an adaptive audio. Now this will also help us to make different states for the music, if the music should be, I don't know, way more intense, or it should be quiet all of a sudden. This is also where we can control it. And the one last thing is the exposed parameters, which are just like in general works like snapshot, but they will be on a local base. Exposed parameters will help me to control a specific parameter from a specific effect. I can just expose it, and when it's exposed, I can reach it through code and do all kind of shenanigans with it. So exposed parameters, it's where I'll change, let's say, the volume of the heartbeat as the player loses his life. So based on a specific parameter, I will raise the heartbeat volume and I'll open up a filter. Or the exposed parameters will always measure the distance between the player and the ending gate of the game. And as the player approaches the gate, it will raise a specific instrument in the music. So exposed parameters will help me control locally different parameters in my mix, and a snapshot will change global mixer states. Again, if it's not clear, feel free to send me questions and I will answer it all. So let's route our first group into our audio source. So I can just go to my amp source game object, click on output, and here I will see all the different outputs I currently have, and I can route it into birds. Or I can be cool and just drag and drop the group into my output. And currently, this audio source, which is 3D, sorry, now it's 2D, will play into the bird group, which is routed into the ambience group, which is routed into the master group. So this is how I basically route my audio source or my audio clip into the audio mixer. Now, if you remember, it's was not part of our building blocks because you don't actually have to have an audio mixer inside your game. You could just fine hear all of your sound in the game without the audio mixer. But what are you doing there as a sound designer if you're not gonna mix the sound? Again, the audio mixer, it's our most basic tool, no matter if we're doing live shows or post-production or whatnot. Audio mixer literally help us to mix the sound, and when it comes to games, to actually create an adaptive sound. And as I said earlier, those audio sources gonna get messed around quite quickly inside your game, so it will be horrible to try and change different parameters on each audio source if you want to change your game mix. And also, the audio mixer will allow us to mix our game as we're playing, as we'll see in a minute. But do bear in mind, the audio mixer lives outside our scene. That means it's not gonna load up or take any memory as you start your game. Okay, you can have one audio mixer for all of your game levels and all of your scenes that they're not related at all. Like the audio mixer lives outside our scene. So you have an audio source that plays an audio clip, and this audio clip or this audio source is routed into the audio mixer, and the audio listener listens to the output of the master group from your audio mixer. Now you can have an audio source that is not routed at all to the audio mixer, and the audio listener will hear that as well, even if you have other audio sources that is routed to the audio mixer. Do pay attention to this. It can drive you nuts if you just will hear stuff and you're like, why the volume does not change this volume of this audio source? And it's probably because you missed some kind of a routing issue, and that's probably the issue there. Anyway, let's go over all this process quite quickly and check it all out again. So let's drag our next audio clip into our game. So let's go into our audio folder, and just a second, I want to see if I have questions up so far. No, we're good. Oh, Fradesh, I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong. Wrote something. Oh, for sure, dude. Watch it whenever you can, for sure. And yeah, it's quite funny. I hope it fitted quite nice. I hope the forest is not scary and it like fitted. Never mind. Let's drag in our music audio clip. So I'm gonna open a new folder. Actually, not inside this SFX. I'm gonna open a new folder here, and I'm gonna call it music. And I'm gonna drag my music audio file. Let's go to music, and this is just the music I composed way back sometime to some game, and the game was iterated, so this music was not used eventually. Let's open up a new game object inside our scene. We're gonna call it music source. I like the capitals. Source, all right. Into this music source, we're gonna drag and drop our audio clip. Oh, sorry. And just out of good practice, because we want everything organized, we're gonna reset the transform. Not just a small word about it. A transform just shows us where our game object lives inside our scene. And as you see, I'm creating game object and they just pop inside our scene. And if this game object does not have any meaning where they're located, it's a general good habit to just reset your transform and make sure all those game objects just live inside one part, or like one area of your game, which will be like the 0,0,0,0,0,0,0 place in your transform. Never mind. So let's route this audio source into its proper group. So let's go to master, create a music group. Cool. Let's click on it again, drag and drop. Now, I do want the music to play on wake. Like I do want, as the player starts the game, the music to play. And I do want it to play on loop until we tell it otherwise. Now, because this music sound file was exported to some different game, if I'm gonna press play now, it's gonna be way too loud. So I know in advance to keep the volume a bit low. But in general, that's all. Like everything we went through, or everything we talked about throughout this stream, literally, you know, the basic building blocks can probably take us up to 2 minutes to set it all up. But we can actually just start to drag files into our game and start playing around with them and actually mix them. And let's have a look about the mixing and why the audio mixer is so freaking cool. So as we play, press play, we're gonna hear our music and our birds ambience. Cool. And you know, it's games, like on video, if you wanna make a mix, you're watching the video and you're changing different parameters, and you can sometimes, I don't know, do some automation in live. But for a game, you want to mix the game as you play it. You want to change the assets in real time. So here you can just click under Edit and Play Mode. And right now, I can change all the parameters I want as I play. So let's say I'm like, this bird ambience is way too loud. So let's take it lower. Sorry. Sorry. Let's take the music a bit lower. Cool, and I'll take the birds higher. Oh, actually the music higher. And I'm like, okay, that mix fits. And I can close the edit and play mode. And that mix, or everything I change here, will stay. It's important to note that if I'll change a parameter here, let's say I'll take the volume all the way down, and now I'm exit the play mode, it's gonna go back to where it was. Now it looks weird, or intuitively for a lot of people it will be, but I just changed it, I wanted to stay the same. But no, this is actually great, because during the game, you're gonna change a lot of different stuff. Programmers for sure will change a lot of parameters as they play. They don't necessarily want those changes to stay after they finish playing. They want it to all to go back. There's a way to go around it and copy those parameters. Never mind. It's important to know that if you change a parameter on your mixer, the mix stays. Also, when you come to snapshot, if you change the parameters on a specific snapshot, it will change it only on that specific snapshot. So you can already see how the mixer, right from the get-go, as you're implementing your first sounds, can help you to actually mix your sounds and mix your game. Cool. One last thing I want to talk about. As I mentioned earlier, it's important to be tidy and have everything as clean, as neat as possible. And as you see, as I press play, all those different game objects just instantiated or just appeared inside my game. Instantiated is a situation where a game object is loaded into the map from code. It's not lived from the beginning here for all kind of reasons, but just so you know, you can see those game objects appear on the hierarchy here all of a sudden. What I'm trying to say is that this hierarchy can get quite messy quite quickly. And let's say I want to look for my audio source. It's gonna be quite hard. Like, yeah, there's the ambient, the music source, but this hierarchy can get really filled up with a lot of game objects, and it's gonna be hellish to search them all up, especially if you're having audio source that is located on a child game object, it's located on a child game object, and you have to look for it, and it's gonna be annoying. So what I like to do to keep everything nice and tidy is to open a new game object, and I will just like for dash, I will call it audio for dash. And I'm gonna drag, wait, before I do that, let's reset the transform. And I'm gonna drag those two audio sources under audio. So right now, all of my game objects that are related to the audio is gonna live under this parent game object. Now it's important to know again for the lingo here, this game object is the parent game object of those child game object, all right? And those child game object inherit different kind of parameters or different kind of functions from these parent game objects. In this specific instance, we have nothing on this game object that doesn't inherit anything besides its location. So let's say I'm moving this amp source to the right, and I want to move all of those audio, like just want to move the audio game object. And if I'll move it, you'll see it will also move the child position, but always in relation to the parent. I hope it makes sense. If not, again, let me know. I'll go over it once again. Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. One more time. One more time. Cool. So right now I have all of my audio related game objects live under this one really clear parent game object that holds underneath it all the audio game objects. And again, I believe your programmers, if they're not already have like the way of organizing the projects, will thank you for having it quite organized. So this is up for this stream. We talked about the three basic building blocks of Unity. We have the audio clip, we have the audio source, and we have the audio listener. We talked about the mixer and why it's important to use it right from the get-go. And we talked about a bit how to tidy and keep things clean and have good practices right from the start. Now, I know this is really basic, but you can already download Unity, load in this Red Runner game. And again, if you want the clean, no audio version, just talk to me and I'll send it over. And you can just start loading or implementing your audio clips and your audio sources into your game. So, quenches up so far. So, Young Sidran. I'm sorry, I'm trying to pronounce your name. It's hard. It's hard. I don't have questions yet, but just wanted to say I enjoyed the stream. We froze now. Which froze now? Hey, it's not froze if it's froze. No, I don't think it froze. Maybe it froze. Never mind. Thanks, dude. I'm glad you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the future. On the next stream, which I'm not sure when it will be, first of all, because from a week from now, I'm going to Berlin. I will need to search for a place to do the stream from. So I will let you all know when the next stream is gonna be, and hopefully there won't be any shenanigans what you had earlier. Jesus, that was horrible. But on the next stream, we're gonna talk about animation events, and we're gonna start sounding up the Red Runner. That means we're gonna load in his footsteps, his jumping sound, and his landing sounds, and we will see how we can call an audio source from code. Yes, we're gonna start touching code, and how we can change different parameters from code. When parameters, I mean the audio source parameters, and how we're using how we're using the animations or the animation frames to call an audio source every time a specific frame arrives, or keeping everything in sync as we want it, regardless of what the player is actually gonna do. So yeah, now I know. If you don't know code at all, this could be quite intimidating, and I promise you that on our first steps touching code, this is gonna be horribly confusing, this is gonna be frustrating. Believe me, I've been there, but if I understand it right now, you will understand it as well. Again, you will see weird stuff that will be very hard to understand, like what's up with all those semicolons, and what's the difference between curly parentheses and regular parentheses, and what's a private and a public method, and what do you mean by declaring, and what's a void and a start function. It's gonna be really confusing at the beginning, but believe me, it's not so hard eventually. And you don't actually need to be a programmer, you just need to understand the real basic stuff that will help you to talk to your programmers in the future, or to set up a really basic audio system. And again, I promise you, it's gonna be confusing, but as you'll touch it more or mess around with it more, it will be very, very, very easy to understand as you go. So thanks to everyone who participated, and sorry in advance to all the other people. I literally lost 80% of the people that were in the stream because of this shenanigans earlier. But thanks everyone for participating, and I'll see you again. Bye-bye. Wait a minute. Bye.